What's up, y'all? It's me, Jaret, from your favorite band, Bowling for Soup, and you are listening to my weekly mixtape with Brian Colburn. And you're stoked because I am awesome on this.
What is going on, friends? Welcome to My Weekly Mixtape, the show that takes the classic mixtape approach to building a modern playlist. I'm your host, Brian Colburn, and my guest today is pop punk royalty. He's the voice and pen behind the Grammy-nominated Bowling for Soup. You might also recognize his voice as Danny on Phineas and Ferb, as well as the iconic Chuck E. Cheese. And he's also someone who you might not know on multiple occasions whipped both my and J Sweet's ass in trivia. It's my honor and privilege to welcome the one and only Jaret Reddick to My Weekly Mixtape. Jaret, thanks for being here, man.
Hey, man, thanks for having me.
Well, I'd like to start by asking you the question I ask all of my first-time guests, and that's, what does the word mixtape mean to you?
It's mixtape for me. It's probably the actual meaning of it. I mean, I was around when mixtapes were a thing. So, it's funny. I had a girl give me a mixtape my junior year in high school, and I still remember the songs. Like, I listened to it so much that I think, like, in the order that they were, it almost became its own album kind of thing. So yeah, mixtape used to be this thing that you would make for someone, either to let them know about what music you were listening to, or let them know how you felt about them, or it was a very, very powerful tool.
That's a great way of putting it. Well, normally here's where I jump right into the interview stuff, but my cousin and a few of my friends for the last 16 years have been hounding me about this one. So I'm going to start tonight by embarrassing myself. Back in 2009, Bowling for Soup toured with MC Lars and K Flay, and one of the tour stops was in Hackensack, New Jersey. So I picked up a 4-pack of tickets, and we all decided to make an evening of it. Go to a steakhouse, grab some drinks, and go to the show. Well, the steakhouse had a 2.5-hour wait, and we wouldn't be able to sit down until after the show started. So we said, we'll hit the diner. The diner had no drinks, and everyone said, no worries, Brian, we'll grab the first round at the show. It's the one and only concert in my entire life that I ever went to that was an all-ages, non-alcoholic show. And for the last 16 years, they have been ripping me on it. Brian Buzzkill. However, it was an amazing show. Brandon Brown of Wheatus joins you guys to close it out with a rip-through of Teenage Dirtbag. And now hopefully they can leave me alone because I've admitted it to the man himself.
Well, there you go. Yeah. Gosh, we didn't play a lot of all ages, no alcohol shows back then, but we still don't. But yeah, I'm sorry you did that to your friends.
Well, now that that's out of the way, let's actually talk some music here. And I'd like to start and go all the way back and talk about a couple of the songs off of 1998's Rock On Honorable Ones. As a band for that release, you featured a horn section on the songs 2113, Belgium, Thespian, I Don't Know, and Friday. And because of that dynamic, this album brings kind of a different feel to the band. Was there a reason that horns weren't utilized moving forward and it was just that outlier?
Yeah, it was honestly just sort of like it was a place in time. We had just moved to Denton, Texas, where North Texas University is. It's one of the more popular jazz schools in the country. It's big music scene there, or a big music section, or what do you call it? A music program there. And the guy that was managing our band at the time, who would go on to co-manage us with me until 2007, was actually a really high up trombone player. And so a lot of our friends at the time and friends' bands all had horn sections. Well, in our kind of music that year, Real Big Fish was doing great.
Yep.
Less Than Jake, Goldfinger. There were just a lot of bands that had horns either as part of their band or on certain sections. And so especially bands like Goldfinger were ones that we looked at like, okay, well, they're a 4-piece pop punk band. Pop punk didn't exist yet, but they're a 4-piece band doing kind of what we're doing. We should put some horns on some stuff. And so I'm really glad we did it. I mean, again, we would perform some places and they would come up and play with, locally, but it wasn't something that we ever thought about making it a part of who we were as a band. But yeah, again, just kind of one of those places in time, opportunity. And again, one of those things I'm glad we did it because our horn, if you were to go back and listen to them, our horn arrangements are way, way different than what other people's would be or would have been at the time. They sound different because it was made by a jazz guy. And with really not a lot of knowledge of what we listen to, and so yeah, it's again, that's just a place in time.
Well, since I mentioned the song already, let's get this out of the way. Belgium was recorded, like we just said, with horns for Rock On Honorable Ones. It was recorded without horns on Tell Me When to Whoa, Let's Do It for Johnny, and Songs People Actually Liked Volume 1. It was recorded acoustically on Drunk Enough to Dance, as an international edit on A Hangover You Don't Deserve, as a polka on Sorry for Partying, and as a solo piano ballad for A Nice Night for an Evening, Volume 1. So
Yeah.
when can fans expect a Bowling for Soup, The Best of Belgium release?
Not to mention the elevator music version on Pop Drunk's Not Bread as
What a
well.
catch.
So yeah, that is one of those organic stories that, it's so basically we had done it for Rock on Honorable Ones, and then we had met our attorney who was going to be our attorney for many, many years. And he was like, man, I think y'all need to do a version without horns because I think Belgium could be a single. And so we did that for Tell Me When to Whoa. Well, then we got signed to Jive Records and they essentially wanted all of that EP on Let's Do It for Johnny. So now it's on 3 albums. So therein is where the joke started. It was like, hey, Belgium is on our last 3 albums. We should put it on Drunk Enough to Dance. And there was a band that I listened to called Diesel Boy who
Oh, yeah.
I still listen to, and they're still around and touring now. And we're friends with now, but at the time I just liked their music. But they had a song on one of their albums where you could hear them walk in the room and they play it acoustic and then you can hear them walk out. And I was just like, man, that would be cool. That's what I wanted to do. So we set it up for that. And that pretty much just started the snowball effect of like, okay, well, what's the next version of Belgium going to be?
Well, one of the things I've always loved about Bowling for Soup is there are multiple layers to these songs. There are tracks like I Want to Be Brad Pitt, the bitch song, or Getting Old Sucks, but everybody's doing it, that show off a sense of humor, but they're balanced out with songs like When We Die, or one of my favorite songs from the band Turbulence, which for someone like myself who struggled with anxiety for years has truly helped me through some rough patches in life. So interview aside, first off, thank you for putting this song out in the universe.
Well, thank you for saying that. Thank you.
How does Bowling for Soup strike a balance between the humor and the serious side when it comes to album releases?
Yeah, thanks for asking. What a great question, and definitely, one of those things where there's a definite evolution to this. I think really the reason we became more humorous at first was really because of my insecurities in writing songs. I really just was insecure in writing lyrics. So if I put a funny spin on it, then nobody could really take it seriously. So even if it was a serious song or something that meant a lot to me, I could sort of put a funny spin on it at the end of it or in the bridge or whatever. And then it'd be like, oh, okay, well, he's not speaking from the heart. So let's not judge, what it is he's saying. But then I wrote a song, I guess for Tell Me When to Whoa called You and Me. And that song was kind of like one of those first ones where I was like, okay, I'm gonna stick my toe in here and see what writing like a real heartfelt song feels like. And it got a really, really great reaction and definitely one of my favorite songs of Bowling for Soup's history. So and then that started the whole deal of, we're all metal fans. And so you remember back in the hair metal days, bands always had at least one power ballad.
Yes.
So I was pretty adamant at that point, okay, we're going to have at least one power ballad on every single album. And that's really what started us down that path. Whereas, so like when we did Let's Do It for Johnny, you had Where to Begin. And then wait a minute, is Where to Begin on? No, Where to Begin is on Drunk Enough to Dance, I believe. I don't know. It doesn't matter. Point is that no, because You and Me would be, it does, god damn it. It's there's a lot of albums, but
I know, I've got them all sitting here, the whole stack.
oh, thank you. Thank you. But yeah, so that, Where to Begin, I think was the next one. And then from there, you've got that songs like, I mean, there's 1,000 of them now. We just started playing Me With No You on the last tour, and that song's got a lot of personal stuff to it. So really, I just sort of had to find the balance internally of what I was willing lyrically to let out. And so with Bowling for Soup, I sort of always had a barrier until Turbulence really, or well, When We Die, that's really in the area where I started going, okay, well, I'm gonna let it all out and just see what happens. So, but yeah, and which is great because it's an evolution into songwriting today where, like, if I'm writing for my country stuff, sorry to get off topic, but
No.
like I can really, really let it out there, and I'm not as worried about saying, as many things that actually mean something to me. And then by having those other outlets, it allows me to keep Bowling for Soup reeled in a little bit, meaning that, like, I don't really expect to start talking about, again, even like, let's talk about Hello Anxiety, right? So like my anxiety song is kind of a silly, funny song that's actually kind of sad for Bowling for Soup, right? Whereas if you hear the country one that I just wrote, it's like, oh God, like my heart, kind of thing.
Well, I am going to jump onto the hair band thing for a moment because I know you're a big hair metal fan, as am I. My first ever concert was Poison and David Lee Roth on the Skyscraper tour. So this is kind of my wheelhouse here.
Hell yeah.
Knowing you're into the hair metal scene, Poison, Skid Row, Warren, and you mentioned that you always wanted to have a power ballad.
Yeah.
I've always referred to them as punk rock power ballads. Was that something that has ever, because I feel like Bowling for Soup is one of the few bands that truly embraces that moment on every album.
I call them power ballads. I mean, we really do. That's always been what we call them, and really just because of that. That's how it was categorized. When you bought a Poison record, you got I Won't Forget You, and you got Tesla, you got Love Song, and you got a power ballad on every record, at least one. And then, as those became like the movie soundtracks and more popular songs going into the 90s, sometimes you get two, but I mean, there's not, like that's on the Cinderella record, the one with Coming Home, A Long Cold Winter.
Yeah.
I think there's three, but Coming Home is just gosh, what a great song. So anyway, yeah, I mean, we refer to them as power ballads. I try to do one a record at least, and we just sort of see where we end up. I think the one for Pop Drunk Snot Bread ended up being a little bit more like it was more, like kind of looking back, less about relationships and more about like, hey, I wouldn't change anything, sort of like, I'm going to pay homage to what's going on, but still same vibe.
All right, before we move on, top 3 power ballads of all time from the hair metal scene. What do you got?
Oh man. Okay. First of all, he's putting me on the spot, so I did not prep for this, but I love it. Top 3 of all time. Well, Home Sweet Home is easily the best. I mean, you can say what you want about Motley Crue, and I realize especially this day and age, but 80s hair metal ballads, absolutely, that's the biggest and best of all time.
The original Theater of Pain version or the 91 Decade of Decadence version where he's playing on a grand piano?
I'm gonna go Theater of Pain version just for nostalgia.
Okay,
sake.
fair.
And then I guess for number 2, I'm gonna go Living on a Prayer. No, I mean oh gosh, Wanted Dead or Alive by Bon Jovi. And then let's see. Is that the right one? That's the one? That's how I walk these loaded 6 train. Yeah, yes. I got it. Okay, so that's that one. And then number 4 has to be Poison. So I'm gonna dig deep on this one because I still think I Won't Forget You is just a freaking great. That's a punk rock song, like that could be a punk rock song.
All right. Well, one of my favorite things about the hair band scene was the vocal harmonies, besides the guitar theatrics and everything else. And that's something I've always thought has been a staple of Bowling for Soup's sound. What's your approach to incorporating, but not overutilizing, vocal harmonies throughout the band's music?
Well, we were literally built to be a singing band. When I started Bowling for Soup, I wanted to start what I considered to be the punk rock Beatles. And and it was very important to me. And if you listen to the first album, again, that we made 3 months into us forming, that Eric and I were both lead singers. I wanted two leads. I didn't even stand in the middle. Like everybody sang. And, so it was the four of us singing until Lance left the band. And when Gary started, he really, and that's, just a few years in, by the way. But it was always, the harmonies have always been a huge part. And I'm very proud of that, because it's still the thing that people, when they come away from our shows, even though it's just me and Rob now singing, when they come away from our shows, they're still like, man, those harmonies, holy crap. But yeah, I mean, I think you can go big and you can go over the top sometimes. And I think for me, the secret is try everything. And you can always have, as my friend Linus says, you can always, you just, all you need is enough footage, and so we'll put oohs and ahs on everything. We put harmonies on everything. I'll put a low part, an octave, and blah, blah, blah on everything. And we use some of it and we don't use some of it. And so, and then sometimes you have a chord harmony wise where you're just like, oh my God, that changes how it all feels. I want to reimagine now. I want to reimagine that guitar part because this is stepping on that. And so, I really do let the vocals drive the song itself. And I think that's why we're such a band that you can sing along to. I'm very adamant about enunciating and about everybody in the band enunciating when they sing, so that you can understand the words and that the melodies are easy and not confusing to sing. Because I like bands like Jellyfish and bands like that where the melodies are a little crazier, but that's not our style. Our style is, I want your ear to feel real comfortable going to each next note, and so, again, it's very, very much a big part of the whole song itself.
And I feel like when you've re-recorded some of the songs for the compilation songs people actually liked, volume 1 and 2, you kind of honed in and tweaked a little bit, because on the Bitch song, I remember the original from Let's Do It to Johnny, but one part that always jumps out to me is in the second verse when you sing, and then you're in my face telling me to grow up. I wish you'd grow up. The layers of harmonies in there makes that version feel so much bigger than the original.
What?
Was that something that you were thinking about during the re-record?
We also added an energy by changing the key of it, and we sped it up a little bit. So we didn't do that to all of the songs. The Bitch song, for me, we had just never really gotten what the energy, that song was what got us signed. And I really, there was a lot riding on it. I never thought we nailed it, and I just really, I thought the feel was, it always felt like it was pulling back to me. And so, yeah, there was a little bit of stuff here and there. The thing about the Bitch song, though, the reason why there's a little bit more pizzazz to it on the re-record is because it was recorded at a different time. We did that when we recorded Stacy's Mom for the I've Never Done Anything Like This little single.
Yep.
And then we re-recorded the Bitch song. So this is before we had really decided that we were going to go re-record all of the hits. So that's a very good ear by you to hear that we did a little bit more on that particular song than we did trying to keep the other songs more intact to really where they were, just like sonically kind of give them a little bit of a lift.
So I got to bring up Stacy's Mom.
Yeah.
I understand that this was 2003 and this was the era of Napster, and it was probably Kazaa at this point. Was that the same type of situation? Because I know there's a lot of people that say, oh, All For You, the Blues Traveler song. And I'm like, what?
Right.
Were you guys attributed to Stacy's Mom because of file sharing, or how did this happen?
Well, there's a lot of theories. I think probably LimeWire and Napster and that stuff is probably a good part of it. But also, I think it's actually a little later than that, because it's because I really feel like it really happened when 1985 was on. We were on VH1 every day, and Stacy's Mom was on VH1 every day. And our band, was very like out there and personal and stuff. Whereas Fountains of Wayne were a little bit more cool, and they were, you know, their video, like they're you know, in black and white and like looking at the camera at different angles and stuff. So you really didn't come away knowing what they looked like. Well, you knew exactly what we looked like.
Mhm.
So I think we were in everybody's heads. I think the songs were kind of neck and neck and going in the same places. And then I think there's the mislabeling of the files as well. You know, I think it's the perfect storm. And then the fact that we sort of kept going down that same path, whereas they didn't really write a lot more songs like that. Fountains of Wayne, you know, they're Fountains of Wayne is one of those bands, you know, where Adam Schlesinger, God rest his soul, was a genius.
Unbelievable.
But they weren't setting out to write pop punk hits. They were being Fountains of Wayne, right? I mean, and we, again, it's unfair of me to say that we weren't just being Bowling for Soup. I definitely wasn't trying to write hits. I loved what I was doing. But yeah, I think it's a big combination of all of it. And then also like where we were playing at the time, you know, we're starting to get into like where we were getting to play at more like citywide things where little kids were able to come to see our shows. And so again, just this perfect storm of a wild misinformation. And you know, it's one of those things where we still joke about it all the time. I mean, but again, I meet my kids' friends' parents, and I'm like, "Oh, yeah, what do you do?" I'm in Bowling for Soup. Yeah, Stacy's mom. No, we're 1985, but you know, I get it.
Well, I do want to touch on the Grammys because you had mentioned that in your music videos, you guys had a look. And while you did not win the Grammy for Best Pop Performance by a Duo or Group with Vocal for Girls All the Bad Guys Want,
That's right.
you did win, and I'm using quote marks in the air when I say this, Worst Dressed from Joan Rivers, which, I mean, she was Dot Matrix in Spaceballs. So as far as I'm concerned, that's kind of a W right there.
Well, not to mention, you know, People Magazine too. And so, you know, that was a weird thing where some people would see as a negative, and for us, it was this legitimizing thing to where it's like, oh, we're in the magazine that our grandparents, our grandmas are looking through at the hair salon on Wednesdays, getting their wet set, you know, like we're on Joan Rivers. They know what that is. They know what Joan Rivers is. And so things had started happening for us in another country. And it's like, you know, and there's no real digital age yet. So honestly, what they saw is, you know, a few guys that have college educations and a couple of other dudes like going around and not using what they have available to them to go and get a real life. And all of a sudden, okay, well, we're on the Grammys, and now my grandmother can show everybody at the beauty shop that we're in People Magazine. And, you know, so there was, you know, it's, you know, the old saying, all press is good press, is really not bullshit. I mean, it really is, you know, all press is good press. And especially if it's sort of lighthearted and fun like that, right? Like where people would go, oh man, but you know, you guys got Joan Rivers Worst Dressed. I'm like, yeah, you know what that got us? I mean, that got Chris pointed out on Jimmy Kimmel. And then when we went on Jimmy Kimmel had to fess up to the fact that he had just said this about Chris. You know what I mean? Like we got so many miles out of all of that. Not to mention Brad Paisley, who we had never met, walking with us on the red carpet. And he goes, "Can I just hang with you guys? Y'all look fun." We were like, hell yeah. So, you know, I get to say I did my first ever like a really big red carpet walk with Brad Paisley, one of the greatest guitar players that ever lived.
Oh my God. I think he's one of the most underrated. People don't put him in the top pantheon of guitarists, and listen to a track like Time Warp and your mind is going to be blown.
Well, you have to go see him. Because if you go see him, he does this thing. Well, I mean, of course, I haven't seen him in probably 15 years, but he used to do this thing where he would switch amps and he would start playing metal, and his band would sort of join. He didn't sing or anything, but he would just shred for a while. But then he goes back into chicken picking, which people don't understand. Country guitar is way harder. At that level, country guitar is so hard. There's a reason why Paul Gilbert from Racer X, one of the greatest guitar players that ever lived, studies bluegrass.
I was going to say Mr.
You know,
Big, but Racer X works too.
Mr. Big, that's right. Yeah. So as one of the good things that came out of that.
Now, the actual Grammy nod itself, because that seems like it's something that's commonly used as a benchmark in terms of a band's success. That's the top of the mountain. It's the Grammys. Did it move the needle or open new doors for Bowling for Soup outside of the press aspect of it?
Again, there's a legitimacy to it. So Girl the Bad Guys Want had been on rock radio and was failing miserably. And what happened is that a guy named David Edgar, Pittsburgh Steelers fan, by the way, was in Indianapolis at a station called Radio Now, and had decided this is a pop song, and he started playing it. And by the time we went into the Christmas break, which for the listener, basically the industry shuts down from around mid-December to mid-January, and radio stations, as far as their playlists are concerned, are locked. Now they stop playing Christmas songs and stuff like this, but still, it's like everything is locked in. So like charting wise, everything stays the same for this amount of time. Well, he had put the song into power. So we come back after the break. We had gotten nominated for a Grammy for the song, and it's in power rotation at one of the leading reporting stations in the country. That's a pop station. So that's really what it did, was it got everybody else going, oh, okay, well, maybe we need to be playing this. And then this song added it, and this station added this station. And then the next thing you know, we had a legitimate hit. And then, I mean, again, as far as, one of those things, we had been doing this for 10 years in a van, not joking. Eric and I lived in it for 2 of those 10 years. And a Grammy is like a doctorate. I mean, I'm going to be Grammy nominated forever.
Yep.
So it's one of those things where there's just, I'm overusing the word legitimacy, but this is sort of what we're talking about, right? Is like when these things started to become, hey, this feels this way, this feels this way. Well, that is a deal where it's just like, my mom could say to her friends, oh yeah, he's traipsing around the country, but they got nominated for a Grammy, right? Like, so, but that's really what it did. And then again, it's one of those things where we were asked about it all the time. And again, I hold it very, 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 very near and dear to my heart that we got to experience that.
Now, before we move on, I just want to remind anybody listening, if you want to hear all the songs we're talking about in this interview tonight, just head over to the episode page. You can find it at myweeklymixtape.com. Well, being a huge fan of cover songs like I am, Bowling for Soup has always scratched that itch for me. As far back as Summer of '69 from Let's Do It for Johnny, to your version of Fergie's London Bridge, to your latest cover being a rendition of Taylor Swift's Actually Romantic. Can you talk about what the band likes to bring to these interpretations or songs? Because I never feel like a Bowling for Soup cover is a color by numbers cover.
Well, the idea is always to make it sound like us, with exception of the Britney Spears song, which is a different story because we didn't really have any control over that. And just to give you some insight into that. So when we did Baby One More Time, that was already temped into the movie Freaky Friday at that tempo in that key, and they had already filmed the actors singing along to it. So they were like, we have to do it at this tempo, this key. So when we started playing it coming out like this big, like sort of heavy rock song wasn't that was not our idea. But once it did happen, we embraced it. Other than that, the covers, the idea is to make them sound like us. I mean, I think there's a few, like maybe the Social Distortion, where we just pretty much just played the song because you don't want to do any disrespect to Social Distortion. But when you go out and you do a Kid Cudi song, or as I said, we've done this Taylor Swift song or whatever, I kind of want to make it our own, but keep the song intact. And you'd never want to disrespect the songwriter or the artist. And even if you're doing it for a bit of a laugh, which I can't really think of any of them off the top of my head that we did for a laugh. But, because honestly, when Flowers by Miley Cyrus came out, I mean, I saw that on a video from a friend who was across the world, and I had never heard it. And I just went, holy shit, we've got to cover this song, right? And so we covered it. We got it out really quick. And the Taylor Swift one was really input from other people going, guys, this sounds like you guys. Y'all should cover this song. So we did it that way. So again, all with respect to the artist and to the original people who do it, and never as anything other than just like, hey, we're going to make this song our own because we think the song is cool.
Well, you mentioned Freaky Friday, so I want to go down that Disney rabbit hole for a second. The band recently wrapped up a weekend of shows at Walt Disney World in Orlando, a setting where you had to keep things PG, like the 2009 show I mentioned at the top of the interview.
Yeah.
kind of foreign to anyone who's seen you many a times like I have, but
Yeah.
Bowling for Soup has a long history with Disney, as Radio Disney used to air clean versions of songs like Almost, High School Never Ends, 1985, and Punk Rock 101. Then you have, of course, the band performing Today Is Gonna Be a Great Day, the theme for Phineas and Ferb. Along with that, you've also recorded Disney covers over the years, including The Bare Necessities from The Jungle Book, and most recently, Friend Like Me from Aladdin for the A Whole New Sound compilation. How did that Disney relationship kind of come together initially and continue to thrive over the decades?
Well, the relationships with the channel and the radio station are different. Radio Disney was actually located in Dallas, and we had a guy that worked for Jive that had a vision that was just like, man, I think Bowling for Soup is perfect for this. And took us out to lunch, and the program director at the time, Robin Jones, was a little bit iffy, but gave Punk Rock 101 a shot, and it just did so great, and it just kept going and kept going that we developed a really great relationship, and still friends to this day. And at that point, we would do like full on radio Disney versions of our next two albums. So we would do a Bowling for Soup. We did our version, which is just the version that's out, a clean version, and then we would do Radio Disney version, because you can't just cut the cuss words in the Radio Disney versions. You got to like change the words. So instead of one Prozac a day, one workout a day, right? So, something a suburban mom would do. And then honestly, everything else is just super organic. I mean, the Phineas and Ferb came because the creators were big fans of the band. And that's been a really cool relationship to continue to work with. And then, them hiring us finally this year. We've been working on trying to get into Eat to the Beat for a while. And they had us there this year at Epcot, and it just went so great. And we're so happy to be doing it. And, I think with shows like that, it's hard to convince a promoter, who can get online and see us playing at clubs or, and doing, off color humor and making that such a big part of our show and a lot of swear words and stuff. You have to be able to show them like, oh, okay, well, we can do this kind of show too, and we've been playing state fairs and things like that for many, many years. And so keeping it clean is not that difficult. I had a lot of fun with it this time, because a lot of times what we'll do, and most of the state fairs and stuff, and you can say the words, you just don't cuss in between songs. But with Disney, they were just like, they kind of frowned upon that. And so I just changed the words to all the songs just, as I went. And so I'm just trying to make the audience laugh as much as I'm making myself laugh. And we had a good time doing it. It was a lot of fun. It was a great weekend.
So I have to ask, did the Disney connection and your role with Phineas and Ferb have any bearing on you becoming the voice for Chuck E. Cheese back in 2012?
No, there's no tie-in there. That's all a separate thing. Yeah, I've lent the mouse my voice now since 2012, and it's one of my favorite things on the planet. I love him so much, and it's one of my favorite jobs. And I grew up going to the restaurants and playing the games, and so. But I was doing improv comedy here in Dallas, and the guy that got the relaunch account happened to see me and knew the band and was just like, I think this guy would be the guy. And it just worked out. And so, man, I feel so blessed to be able to do that, because Chucky is just such a huge part of nostalgia and culture and of a lot of people's childhood. And so, the fact that since, gosh, for 13 years or so, I've been your kid's Chuck E. Cheese, it means a lot to me, and I'm super happy about it.
Yeah, I grew up in North Jersey, so there was the battle between Chuck E. Cheese and the Rockefeller explosion from Showbiz Pizza. So you had the dueling thing there. Does that Chuck E. Cheese gig get you like lifetime game tokens? Or like, can you walk in and pull that card with them and be like, do you know who I am?
I never asked. My kids are a little older now, but when they were little, we went there just like everybody else. And, there was one year where they gave me a golden band that got free games for a while, but now I never, they treat me well enough to where I don't mind going in there and supporting the restaurant. And I don't really like to make a big deal about me being in there. I mean, sometimes I'll get recognized or whatever, and they'll come up and be like, "We listen to your voice all day," and sometimes a kid will just hear me talk and go, "Chucky," So actually, that happened to me at the airport yesterday. I was just talking to Gary, my drummer, and a guy just walked by and he just goes, "You sound like Chuck E. Cheese," and then I turned around and he goes, "Oh my God, you are!" So, but yeah, that's I definitely don't mind having a very recognizable voice.
Well, I want to bring up something that is something I know you've talked about before, but for the listeners of the show who might not know, I want to bring up one of the band's biggest hits, which is 1985. Now, along with Bowling for Soup, I'm also a big fan of SR-71, whose third album, Here We Go Again, was originally released in Japan only in May of 2004. So you can imagine my surprise when 2 months later, Bowling for Soup released your version of the track. Over the years, I've read a lot of conflicting stories. One, that you heard SR-71's version and you asked to cover it. Two, that Mitch Allen from SR-71 called you and offered it up. And three, Butch Walker, the incredible producer, singer-songwriter, and frontman of the Marvelous Three, had some connection to it. Would you mind shedding some light on this once and for all?
Yeah, absolutely. And also, if you want to hear the full story, it's on my pinned at the top of my TikTok. But yeah, it's a very simple story. We were done recording Hangover You Don't Deserve. Mitch and I had known each other forever. We were in Butch Walker's studio, but Butch was not even there. We had stayed there to finish the album after he produced the first 3 tracks, and then we stayed there and finished the record. And it was his manager, Jonathan Daniel, who's still his manager today, manages Train as well, Butch's new band. And Jonathan Daniel called and was just like, "You got to hear this song," because Mitch Allen just sent me, and they knew one another because Butch had produced their big hit Right Now. So he just said, "Man, I just got sent this song." And the thing is that Mitch wasn't looking for anything for SR-71. He was looking for management as a songwriter or as a solo artist. And so this was just on his reel. Jonathan Daniel had the foresight to go, "And that sounds like a Bowling for Soup song," and send it over. And quite frankly, their version is pretty harsh. It's kind of mean. And so at first I didn't really get it, and I listen a couple of listens with Gary, and Gary going, "Man, it's pretty good." And Gary doesn't really ever, he doesn't say anything unless he means it. And so then it was a conversation between me and Mitch, and me just going, "Hey man, can I just have my way with it?" He goes, "You can do whatever you want with it." And yeah, the rest is history. I was able to make a few changes here and there. Butch coached me through some of that as the producer. He came back, produced that track, and we had a big hit with it, and everybody's happy. Because it's like, I think some people will hear, like, "Oh, well, that's an SR-71 song." Yeah, kind of. I mean, it's we Mitch and I and John, the other writer who was the drummer by then in SR-71, considered it a collaboration. And it certainly wouldn't be the song that it is unless all of those things had happened. So if all of those things hadn't happened, so a lot had to happen. We needed to be on the right label. We had to go make the right video. I mean, that the video was such a huge part of the success of that. But everybody involved deserves all the credit, because there's Mitch, and John writing the song, and then Mitch being cool about it, and Jonathan Daniel, and then Butch, and then our A&R guy Howie, being even open to the idea, and just a lot of moving parts that had to happen to make that song a hit. And so, but yeah, I think sometimes people will kind of look at it as like a negative thing, that, "Oh, well, they covered an SR-71 song," and to me, it's like, I don't think they understand how much it benefited SR-71 and how much they wanted this to happen, as well. And I think, and another thing, you're a guy that's talking about songs. I think you'd be surprised how many people don't write their big hits,
right.
And I think, just the general person on TikTok, they like to point out, "Oh, SR-71, yeah, SR-71, that's great," but I don't take that as a negative. It's a positive thing, and we all got a bunch of plaques on the wall from that song.
Now, you were mentioning the collaborative effort of 1985, and I want to dive into that a little bit more, because you recorded a cover of Hanson's Where's the Love with the members of Hanson. as a
Yeah.
single for the Don't Mind If We Do album. You also
Yeah.
did a split EP with Kelly Ogden and the Dollyrots, which is the Dollyrots versus Bowling for Soup, where you each covered each other's music. You
Yeah.
also worked with Poison. We were talking hair bands before. Poison's Bret Michaels on a cover of Sublime's What I Got. And you collaborated with, I mentioned them earlier, Blues Traveler on I Know Right and Right Here Waiting for You on their 2015 album, Blow Up the Moon. Can you talk about how these collaborations come together in a traditional sense and maybe what all the bands take away from the crossovers and the cross-pollinization of genres here?
I mean, that's a super complicated question because every one of those things you listed is a completely different story, different relationship.
Fair.
I mean, it's it's for us and the Dollyrots, doing a split 7-inch around a tour, that's kind of where that I'd done that before. We did a tour with the Dollyrots and a band called Patent Pending, Rob's original band. And we actually did a whole album of that where we all put a new song and we covered one of each of the other band's songs.
Was
and
that
it's
the
called
One Big Happy compilation?
One Big
Yep.
Happy. Yeah. And so each one of those is its own thing. With Bret, his guitar player Pete Evick is a good friend of mine, and I met him because Pete is a really big Bowling for Soup fan, and thus Bret became a fan, and I got asked to be a part of that. And Blues Traveler, all of those songs on that record are all
Yes.
collaboration. So they went and worked with 303, and they went and worked with a lot of different other bands. And so when they came in, I had them for 2 days, and I got to write with John, and we wrote one song the first day and we recorded it. We wrote one song the next day and recorded it, and everybody in our bands played on them and stuff like that. And I got to produce freaking John Popper in the studio, which was great. A lot of times it's about relationships and sometimes it's about ideas. I think a lot of times you got a smart manager or a smart A&R person that puts two people together. For me, most of these have been most of my stuff, most of my collaborations have been about relationships, whether it's just, wanting to do something with a friend, or, being asked to do something by a friend, or, somebody's kid is a fan and they're like, I gotta get this guy to do this, so it just varies. But, I think collaboration is one of the key components to it all. Like, you learn so much just from writing songs with other people. And I think also fans love to know that their favorite bands like each other and stuff. It's the reason why, when you go see a tour, you'll almost always see one of the bands come out on stage with one of the other bands and stuff, because that shows this camaraderie. That shows that, oh man, that's so cool that they do that and that they know each other and that they love one another, and and all that. And so I think that's it's a very special aspect of the whole darn thing.
Well, I could honestly go album by album asking you questions about all my favorite Bowling for Soup songs, but out of respect for your time, I'd like to touch on a trio of songs. The
Okay,
first
perfect.
one being both of my daughter's favorite Bowling for Soup songs. So if I don't ask about this, I'm going to get in trouble. And they're both teenagers, so they will hold this against me now.
You don't want any part of that.
No, I most certainly don't. And that song is a really cool dance song from Sorry for Partying.
Yeah.
Do you consider Bowling for Soup a band that, quote unquote, has no boundaries when it comes to recording? Because to kick off an album with a song that is literally a dance song and you're screaming, it's our new sound, that takes a lot of brass, man. But I got to admit, it was a home run right out of the gate.
Yeah, that song, it's one of those things where it was that time. In that time in 2008, 2009, when I came up with that idea. I was writing my very first songs with my best friend Linus of Hollywood, who would go on to produce most of almost every Bowling for Soup song until today. And it was our first time writing together. And I was like, I got this idea for a song, and it's basically making fun of everybody else in my genre, because everybody has added all these keyboards and he calls them bleep bleep bloop bloops, and I'm like, they're all like putting the 4 on the floor beat, you know what I mean? Like, everybody was doing that. And so it really kind of goes back to our reaction with the horns, back in the late 90s. It's like, well, why don't we just do it? But in this way, let's be a little bit silly about it. Let's go in and go, hey, we're going to change our whole sound to this. And it just couldn't have worked out any perfect. I remember like we had had the beat down and we had already written all the lyrics and stuff. And the first time he went, "Bum, bum, bum," and I was just like, oh my God, that's perfect. And so, yeah, a song honestly written to make fun of the genre that we hold so near and dear to our hearts. Fortunately, we're all back out of that, I think now. I don't think anybody's really still doing that anymore. But, a place and time. And I think I don't think any of my peers were like upset about it because everybody knows who we are. It's all in good fun.
It's definitely one of those ones where anytime a dance song is on, my girls will literally say to me, "We are dancing. This is awesome. We are dancing and we're dancing. Because I can't dance for shit. So they love to throw that in my face.
Well, you can tell them this about all of that is all ad-libbed. So that's all just like we are dancing. That's all of that is just me fucking around at the end of a song. And I'd had a few beers and it's just, you got to do what's called an ad-lib section or whatever. And then, so in all of it, and we're back. Like all of that is just, it's great. It's funny for me to listen to now because I remember laughing about that for days afterwards, and that's sort of how most of the stuff, like even the thing, like if I'm talking usually in a song, for example, "If Only You Were Here," or "Here's Your Freaking Song," or whatever, almost every single one of those is first take because I'm really weird about things starting to sound rehearsed. So I just get up on the mic and do what it is I want to do. And normally it sticks.
Well, now for the only Brian would ask this question portion of the interview. So I apologize in advance. But at the beginning of "A Friendly Goodbye" from the Great Burrito Extortion Case, you yell out "freeze frame" as the song kicks in. And I've listened to that song a million times and I'm like, this doesn't sound like the Jay Giles band. I'm trying to picture the keyboard. Is there some connection or was that another ad-lib?
Full on ad-lib. And, we were having so much fun making that record. There's a lot of Easter eggs like that. And so no, absolutely no real reason why I would have said that. It just, don't I say something after that or say something before it? I say something and then I say "freeze frame." But yeah, all ad-lib and, again, no rhyme, no reason to that.
Okay, so I'm not crazy because I sat there going like, I'm trying to put the keyboards from "freeze frame" over the guitar. And I'm like, these are in different keys. What the hell?
Nope.
Thank you for clearing that up for me. And now, as my youngest and I are both big WWE fans, I'll assume you are as well, given the track Alexa Bliss. Why the hell hasn't she used that for her entrance music yet?
I don't know how much control she has over that. I mean, I can't really speak for her, but I can tell you, the WWE is its thing. I mean, it controls a lot or all of everything. What I can tell you is that, that was a very, very lucky relationship because I'm so blessed that we're friends. And she ended up marrying a friend of mine from back, me and Ryan Cabrera have known each other since he was a kid, and because he's from here. But actually, my son, who's now 19, had gotten into wrestling, and so I liked wrestling when I was a kid. But I'm from Texas. I like the Von Erichs.
Okay.
You guys would call the Texas Tornado, but we call them Kerry Von Erich, the modern day warrior.
Yep.
And of course, now you can see the movie and you know that. But the Von Erichs were, in fact, if you don't know this, I actually used Von Erich as my stage name for the first 4 or 5 albums. And Kevin has made me an honorary Von Erich. So it's all legit. But gosh, I can't get to the answer to the question. I'm just keep adding to this. But
it's awesome.
Yeah, so
go ahead.
Anyway, I had seen, someone had tagged me on Twitter that there was a wrestler who, like way back in the day, had said something about us, and I couldn't quite remember who it was. And I just sort of put it back there or whatever. Well, then me and my son are at a wrestling thing here in Dallas, and Alexa Bliss comes out and I go, "Hey, I think that girl."
I'm not sure how to help you with that.
Alexa, off. I can't say her name anymore. You should have heard it when I was recording that song because they're everywhere all over this house, by the way. So I said, I think she likes my band. He's like, no way. And so I look her up, and sure enough, I found the tweets. But not only that, I found pictures that would turn out to be her final photo shoot before she left for training for the WWE, and she was wearing a Bowling for Soup shirt. And so I just sent her a message in her DMs, and she messaged right back, like, hey, are you coming backstage? I'm like, no, I'm in the nosebleeds up here. Anyway, long story short, we met, and turns out she's a big fan of Bowling for Soup, and she's just such a lovely, lovely girl, and they have such a beautiful family. But the song is because all of these bands just have these cock rock songs, what a lot of people would call, what do you call it? Ass rock, or any, I would call it cock rock, but which is great. But to me, they all sound the same. So I was like, why wouldn't this girl who is like she sets herself apart so well from everything else, and she loves pop punk. Like, why wouldn't she have a pop punk song? And so we did the song, and WWE was amazing. She was more amazing in helping get it through, but literally let her come to my house, be in character, use the suit, be in the video, like as her, like, I mean, I don't know how much you know about the red tape that is the WWE, but you could probably imagine that was not fucking easy to pull off. And she spearheaded that and made sure it happened. And there was rumors that we would get to play her out at WrestleMania, and then the pandemic happened. And so
Oh,
since then it's kind of been lost in and she's in and out of wrestling, and building her family and stuff like that. And so I think it probably missed the window on it being her walkout song, but to be honest, I'm just happy that the song exists, and I'm so happy that she's a part of our lives, and we're really, really lucky. As I said, I feel very, very lucky that just that one interaction that my kid took, and that we ended up building this friendship just based on that one, me remembering that there was a tweet.
well, in the spirit of my weekly mixtape, if you had to choose 3 Bowling for Soup songs that resonate with you the most, now I'm not talking about the hits or the fan favorites. I'm talking about the tracks that mean the most to you, Jaret Reddick, the songwriter. Which
Yeah.
3 would you choose and why?
Friends of Mine, that song is really, really important to me and the band, and really sums up, how much I just absolutely love them and what we do. Turbulence, because of the lives that it's impacted, including mine, and what that song will continue to do as long as I'm talking about mental health, and that song gets associated with me and my cause with that, with depression and anxiety and all of that. And then, I mean, I really have to say, "Girl, the Bad Guys Want" is one of the most special songs in the world, because the bitch song got us a record deal, but "Girl, the Bad Guys Want" gave us a career. I mean, if it weren't for that, if the bitch song, we got to make a record, and then it did well in the UK, and if it weren't for that, we wouldn't have got to make a second record. But had we not had that hit on pop radio and crossed over and got the Grammy nomination and went out and met all these radio stations and people and fans and all these things because of that song, then we would have never had the chance to make "Hangover You Don't Deserve," which is, the album that it changed our lives. And so, again, it's funny. I just did an interview with a kid before you, and he did this thing where he just goes, you started the band, and then you had a hit, you did this, blah, blah, blah. So like, how was all that or whatever? And I just go, that is a lot of time. That's a lot of time. But from the time we started the band to the time "Girl, the Bad Guys Want" was out was 9 years. So hit 10 years in. 10 years is a third of the time we've been a band. So nothing, none of this was easy. So you kind of look back. For me, I look back on the work that those songs did, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
And I should tell you this. That's my first ever like real co-write. So I had only written songs either by myself or a few with, the guys in my band. Me and Butch sat and wrote "Girl, the Bad Guys Want," which opened up the whole world to me as far as co-writing is concerned. It's just like, as I really like that in my life now. So a lot of the material wouldn't even exist. So yeah, those are definitely, I think those are a safe 3, and definitely, I'll stamp it.
All right. So before we close out, what does Bowling for Soup have in store for 2026 and beyond? Is the most recent single, Holding On to That Hate, the first taste of a new Bowling for Soup album?
Absolutely. We went and did Holding On to That Hate with really no plans to get in the studio. And once we came out of there, it was obvious that we got the fever. So we're going up to the Poconos. We're going to record a new record in February. We have tour dates in Australia with Frank Turner already announced. We have plans for the UK and the USA and hopefully Japan, and also more releases that we already have in the can as well that I can't talk about, but so much good stuff. And, it's just it's a true blessing to be able to do this still 31 years in, and through band member changes and band retirements, and to still be on the road with my best friends. And, I just feel very, very lucky. And even sitting here talking to you, man, it's a true blessing.
Well, the honor's been all mine. I've been looking forward to sitting down with you for a long time. Thank you for the many smiles, the many laughs, and the many heartfelt moments with Bowling for Soup's music. It means the world to me. And thank you for joining me on My Weekly Mixtape.
Thanks for having me, brother.
And to those listening, be sure to head over to the episode page at myweeklymixtape.com, where you can find a full playlist as well as all of the music videos we've discussed in tonight's interview. While you're there, hit the contact page and send me future episode ideas. You can also reach me at myweeklymixtape@gmail.com. If you have a suggestion for a future episode, or you want to chime in on this interview, you can hit me up on all the social media haunts at My Weekly Mixtape. And you can also join the Mixtaper community over at patreon.com/My Weekly Mixtape. It's free to join, and there's tiers if you'd like to support the show on another level. Once again, my name is Brian Colburn. This has been My Weekly Mixtape, and I hope you enjoy going down the Bowling for Soup rabbit hole, because I sure as hell certainly have. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next week.